So
Yeah.
listen, Tony, it's that time of the week where we go back down history lane to look at some of the stories told and some of the stories which were never unfolded before our eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a little bit of Black history from What a Week with our historian, Mr. Tony Crossbody. What have you got for us, Tony?
Yeah, so if we can start from slide number 4, right? Slide number 4, that's the Africa map.
I'll just quickly read that. Dawn's lasting words were about education her given. She didn't understand where she was coming from. I would have loved to have heard the remainder of the conversation. The struggle is real. Sad as we have to fight between ourselves and the lack of Black allies in a position that we need. Thank you very much, Carolyn. So sorry, Tony, back to yourself.
That's a good point, Carolyn. So we were talking last week, and I want to sort of repeat some of the things I said last week again this week, because obviously, because we've been in front of a television, a lot of us, since we were 5 years old, and been in the school system for maybe at least 12, if not 15, 16 years, we may not realize the level of our indoctrination. A lot of what we've learnt has been supplemented by the media, by documentaries, for example, on BBC about history, and we've pretty much been written out of it. And one of the tactics used to diminish our Black contribution to history is this whole idea that Black people only came out of Africa. That is something that basically a lot of historians say. So whenever you see a painting with a Black child or a woman or a Black man, they're always some sort of slave from Africa. That is the narrative. And we've been indoctrinated to accept that narrative. Now, the problem with that is if you accept that Black people only came out of Africa, the implication is that white people came from everywhere else. Do you see? If you accept that Black people only came out of Africa, then the implication of that is white people came from everywhere else. And that means that whenever history is being written about in various parts of the world, our indoctrinated minds basically goes to thinking, oh, it must be European, oh, it must be white people. And, you know, we've even been taught, or we've been trying to be indoctrinated with this whole idea that even Egypt, apparently, is not a Black civilization. But as we're going to see, it clearly is. Next slide. So in this next slide, which we're waiting for, there was a recent discovery. There was a recent discovery a few years ago of this man on the left called Cheddar Man. He was found in, I think it was Lancashire, in some caves that I think were called the Cheddar Caves, hence the name Cheddar Man. And a DNA reconstruction of him was done. And we were told by scientists and anthropologists that this was the first man, the first peoples that inhabited these islands, the British Isles, inclusive of Ireland. Now, when this first broke, a lot of people in England said, nah, that's a lot of nonsense. That's not a Black man because he's got blue eyes. Apparently, Black people don't have blue eyes, according to their understanding. But as you can see, with the beautiful girl on the right-hand side, Black people do have blue eyes. So this is the original man, 7,000 BC, apparently, he was dated as being on this continent. So if Black people were here first and nobody else was here, how can we have all these white paintings of kings and all these monarchs and so forth? Well, here's the reason why. Next slide. The next slide tells us why a lot of these paintings that we see and are shown on TV and in museums are of white characters, because a lot of them are fake. Yep, I said it. A lot of the paintings of monarchs are fake. Next slide. Here is a classic example of a fake painting. This painting claims to be of a gentleman, a prince in fact. His name is Charles Lennox, Duke of Richmond, and he was the son of Charles II, who was King of England. Now, how do we know this painting is fake? Well, a contemporary who lived around the time wrote in the accompanying page there, as you can see next to the picture, describing this very character that we're looking at as someone with black complexion, much like King Charles, and King Charles being his father. So does this painting show a man of black complexion? Clearly not. And this backs up, and there are many examples like this in British history that you will find where characters are painted white, but they're actually described as black. Next slide. So here is his father. This is King Charles II, affectionately known as the Black Boy. No prizes for why he got that name, but he is the father of the previous chap. The writing there tells you, describing his son, he says that he's black in complexion, much like his father, and this is his father, Charles II. Next slide. But we're not just confined to the UK when we're looking for black rulers and monarchs. We can go all the way across to Russia. And here we have an original painting of Peter the Great, the Emperor of Russia. Yes?
Wow, don't tell me this. I learned about this guy at school so many times and they never mentioned this color at all, man.
Black Emperor of Russia. You will never be told that. You never want to share this stuff. You have to, Mr. C, when you're doing this sort of research, right, it's like you have to be like a detective, because a lot of this information is not readily available. You've got to go around and start digging. And fortunately, there's some very good black resources that you can use.
Good, man.
And so...
Black Columbo.
Yeah, you've got to be like Columbo with this thing because it's not being taught, and the information, you just really got to dig for it. You've got to really be wanting to find it to actually receive it. So next slide, please. Now, this man here is another Russian, right? His name is Alexander Pushkin. He is a famous playwright, famous novelist, revered Russian figure.
No. Pushkin was a man of color.
How you mean? Right? So we're talking about Russia here. It's not even like we talk about the continent of France or not continent of Europe. We're talking far into the east, right? Russian. These are native Russians. These are not people out of Africa as we have been sold. They were on the continent long before anybody else. But every time you see a black picture, what's the story? Oh, he's from Africa.
Look at him again, good, Let me look at him good again, master. All right.
Yeah. So that is the famous Russian novelist. Next slide, please. Here's a famous French general. His name is Alexander Dumas. His grandson, also called Alexander Dumas, wrote the famous Man in the Iron Mask.
But those Three Musketeers, isn't it? No?
Three Musketeers, correct. That's right. But Alexander Dumas Sr. was a general in the French army, and he was much hated. Him and Napoleon had a very strong rivalry. But he was a fearless general, very brave soldier in the French army during the Napoleonic Wars. So basically, what we're seeing here, we're seeing all these characters turn up out of Europe. Next slide, please. If you're wondering who this character is, this is King Philip II of Spain, Spanish king who ruled Spain at the height of Spanish power, right? That is not normally the picture you will see of him if you do a Google search of King Philip II, but that, I assure you, is the man. So far, we've seen monarchs in Britain, monarchs in Russia, monarchs in Spain, and we have evidence that the first man to live in the British Isles, to come from the British Isles, was a black man. So what it is indoctrination keeps us from realizing that Europe was originally a black continent, which was eventually invaded and the blacks were pushed out. Next slide, please. Here we see an Italian crest from a famous family in Italy called the Pucci family.
Well, we don't know about Pucci, but black people know about Gucci. I can tell you that, Tony.
Yes, this is not Gucci, it's Pucci. But look at the man's face. Look at that head.
Yeah,
This is an original Italian, right? This is not an African slave. This is not a servant. It is an original Italian. This is a crest for a very prominent Italian family.
Just want to backtrack there, Tony. Sorry. Caroline says that the Spanish king looks like Mystery. One of our legendary DJs, PC Mystery.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony, continue.
No. But I mean, the point here is, Mr. C, you see years of indoctrination and, you know, watching TV and educating system, you see, whenever you hear the word Europe, right, you automatically think white. I guarantee you that if anybody does a DNA test, any black person doing it, you are going to see a percentage of European DNA in your readings. And there's a reason for that. Most people who see a European reading, most black people who look at a DNA reading and see European, automatically, oh, it was when the slave masters raped the women. You see, this is the same old chestnut story that always comes out. You never hear about the fact that the first Europeans were black. And I have we don't have the time. You know, I can go into the early Romans, the Greeks, you know, all these people that everybody believes are white actually they were the original black people. And their societies over the centuries became more multicultural as time went on. Next slide. So we have recently this lady here who played Wonder Woman.
Yes.
Has been casted now for Cleopatra, the movie, and there's been a big uproar, right? Now, the uproar, believe it or not, doesn't come from black people. It actually comes from North African Arabs who are complaining that a North African actress should be playing this character because Egyptians are North African Arabs, right? But is that really true? Let's look at this. Let's look at this quick video here.
Egypt has always traditionally been given prominence as the height of ancient culture. Nubia is now coming into its own and is being understood to be of equal importance. It is different from ancient Egypt, but it is equally important and not just an adjunct to this Egyptian culture. What archaeologists do when they pull material from the ground or when they translate texts, they bring their own cultural baggage to that interpretation and the baggage of the times that they live in. And so it's imperative that we go back and continually reassess the things that we take as facts. Many of the early archaeologists came to the study of ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia from the perspective of Semitic languages or the study of the Hebrew Bible. And it was very important to them to bring Egypt specifically into the sphere of biblical studies. And so they had to carve Egypt away from Africa to bring it into that sphere. And the way that they did that was they used race. So these early archaeologists effectively made ancient Egypt white in the sense that they made it part of a dominant Western culture, and ancient Nubia was separated from that. It was black. And this was how they took Egypt out of Africa and put it into this Semitic sphere, this biblical sphere.
So
wow. Yes, man.
They're on words, right? They're on words. Not us saying it, they're saying it. That was the ploy. And until this day, they are trying to argue that Egypt is either white or North African. And they're not realizing, of course, that the reason why a lot of the people in that area have a complexion similar to myself has to do with the Ottoman Turks who invaded that area, you see? And those are the descendants of those people. They're not the original people that were there. The original people were black. And some of you who've been to Egypt have probably met some of these black Egyptians who are the descendants of the original peoples, but they don't want to give you that. What they tell you is that you're from sub-Saharan Africa. right? So they've demarcated Africa, giving you sub-Saharan Africa. They claim Egypt, and then they say, well, look, the North African people, those of my complexion, light skin complexion, they've always been there. And that's the lie. And if you buy that, you see, then you're never really going to understand history, because, of course, Egypt was one of the great civilizations of ancient times. And it had an impact on all the surrounding nations that were around it, including the Hebrews and the Canaanites and all these characters and they were also all black. That's what people don't realize. And so it's very important, you see, that they give you the narrative that Egypt was white, because the implication of that is everything next to Egypt is also white. Therefore, the Israelites are white, the Canaanites are white, the Babylonians are white, the Persians are white. And that is so far from the truth. And this is why, obviously, we have these sort of discussions about it. And this is why it's important for us to go back and look at it again and understand how indoctrinated we have been. Because once we have this indoctrination and we don't rid ourselves of it, we keep repeating that. You see? And it's not true. So black people do not only come out of Africa. Yes, some do, but many were in all parts of the world where they made monarchies, they ruled these places, they were eventually pushed out. I'm going to get into some of that information about how they were pushed out. And even noted historians tell you that the original Europeans were black.
Wow. Listen, another one, Tony. Listen, you started off at England, then you went to Ireland, then you went to Europe, and wow, you're covering the globe and showing us where we were originally, not just in Africa, but so many other places as well, man. Tony, man, again, my brother, listen, I can't believe Russia.
Yeah. And the thing is, you see, if you're going to tell this story, I mean, thank you, Sean. You do have to provide the evidence. There's no point in me sitting there and saying, no, this was black, that was black. In 1555, this was black. No, you have to look at what they say. They give themselves away. You see, you can't hide the truth forever, right? It's like a coiled spring, right? If you hold a spring too tight, you can hold it for a while, but eventually it's going to spring out and it's going to go all over the place. Yeah. That's what's happening now with our history. As more things are being revealed, we're able to build a story of how we got to be in this position.
And listen, you know what? From what you're saying about with the French guy, because the Three Musketeers was one of my favorite films when I was a child as well. You know, I used to watch. I used to get my broom and boss up enough people heading off, going like some of his Errol Flynn. Right.
And a black man wrote that book, right?
And it was written by a black man. You know, the Count of Monte Cristo. Fantastic. No, not the Count of Monte Cristo. The man with the iron mask, I should say. Yeah. No, man, absolutely fantastic, Tony, man. So listen, we've run out of time, ladies and gentlemen, which is a good thing, because it just goes to show that 31 days is not enough to cover the depth and the richness of our history, and an hour and a couple of minutes is just not enough time to cover what's going on in a week for us. What a week. Final thoughts from yourself, Tony?
No, let's give thanks for Lewis Hamilton again, these accomplishments. Let's thank Marcus Rashford for the work that he's doing. Let's talk about Raheem Sterling, right? The fight goes on. The fight starts in the mind. We have to sort of get the attention of our own people first, and then talk, and then gather together as one. That's where the battle is. It's for the mind.
Definitely. Also, a big thanks going out to MP Dawn Butler for not boxing down the woman, the devil in Parliament, and showing you that black people, we're not just angry. We can be articulate. We can make our point and represent our people the way how our culture is. Absolutely black and beautiful. And we want to say, for all of the queens who were on Loose Women, that was a moment that will stay for us forever and a day. This has been What a Week. My name's been Mr. C, Tony Crossbody. We'll catch you back same time, same place. Remember to like, subscribe, and to share. Thank you. Good night.